Could Bitcoin skyrocket to $82,000 in November? Will it make a record-breaking move? That's what I'm going to cover in today's video, so hit that like button and let's jump into it. All right, today we're going to jump into the possibility of what I think Bitcoin could potentially do in November here. We've got some really extreme things coming up in the next week here that's going to affect the price of Bitcoin potentially here. I'm going to give you my price targets in this video and whether I think Bitcoin could make a move up to $82,000 or not. So let's jump into it here. All right, so as we've covered on the channel before, we broke out of this channel that we've been in for 250 days. We shot all the way up to 73,500 here. We were just short of the all-time high with this move here, and then we're just making a correction down from this move upwards here, which I think is normal, but we did break below this 50-day EMA. We need to get above this, and this is on the daily chart, of course, but if we break through this, which I think we could potentially do with the news that's coming up here over the next week, we could potentially break up to like 76,000 on the next move once we break through this all-time high level here. We need to break through this level here, and I think our next target would be 76,000, and then maybe we break down and retest the previous all-time high from there. And then as you can see, the next move up from there would be $82,000. Now, if we look on the weekly chart here now, we still got rejected from this 50-week moving average here, and we had this candle, which is not very bullish. We're still below this 50-week moving average. We really need to break up above here and make this 50-week moving average our support. I think with the potential news of the elections coming up here in the next few days is going to determine whether that happens or not. Also, we have a rate cut coming up here, and we're going to cover that in this video as well. I'm going to share with you my opinion on that. Last October, we had this move up, and then in the end of October, we little move up, and then November, we had a little bit further move up. We kind of went sideways here the last week of October, which is the candle that just closed on Bitcoin for the weekly. And then in November, we moved up, and here's the last week in November last year. So really towards the end of November is when we moved up. Just like in October, it waited until the last week of October to move up, just like it did this time. I'm thinking maybe this is when we make our move up, is the last week in November, and then another move up into December before we go sideways into 2025. Hopefully this is what happens here, but we'll have to see what happens. Like I said here, this is the 50-week moving average. We were below it last October as well, but we did break through it in the last week of October, and then we got above it and we stayed above it from there on out. So we really need to get above this 50-week moving average before we are going to see any significant move in Bitcoin. And if you look on the chart here, it is signaling a buy on the weekly chart with Bitcoin, which is good, and it's showing that we could make a move up. We get above this 50-week moving average, and I think we're going to be good to go. So we'll jump into the Bitcoin monthly returns chart here. We are in the negative for November, but it is still very early in November. We're just in the first week in November. We had some sell-offs in early October as well, and people were like, well, where's October? And then we finally did make a 10% move, in the month of October. So we did make positive returns in October. We didn't do the average of like 21%, but 10%, I'll take it. Still a green move for Bitcoin in the month of October. Hopefully, we will make a good green candle in November as well. If you look at the past year, every time September and October were green, when both months were green. We've also had a green November and December every time in the past that has happened. So hopefully we follow suit here, and that happens to be the case as well. I'm thinking this will be the case because of the rate cuts coming, but the presidential election could have an impact on this as well. But I think overall we're still going to have a green November. So this article here is talking about how the Fed is on track to cut rates next week, which will be this week, and in December. So they're talking about a rate cut for November and December, which is good for crypto. They're saying here with inflation just above the Federal Reserve's 2% target and wage pressures easing, the central bankers are widely expected to cut short-term borrowing costs in an effort to keep the labor market from further cooling. If you go to the chart here, you can see this 2% target by the Fed. We are on track to reach that. And if you look at the CPI data here, we're just above that 2% target with it. And the PCE target is actually going to hit the 2% mark here. And the core CPI as well is starting to move up a little bit, but we're still pretty close to that 2% mover, right around a little over 3% with the core CPI. But if you look at the regular CPI chart here, that's basically on track to hit that 2% target that the Fed is looking to reach. So we are still on track with that, and it's looking really good. So this chart here, the PCE, the short-term view, basically they're showing here that, inflation has been sticky over the last 6 months, but it is on a downward trend, which is good. We may see a little bit of a move up, but overall we're still on a downward trend, and things are still on track for what the Fed is looking to do. In September, the year-over-year increase in personal expenditures price index was at 2.1%, so it's still just above that 2% target by the Fed, which is really good. That is showing that it's still on track to reach their goal of 2%. So I expect a rate cut in November and potentially one in December, but I think that is going to depend on what happens with the U.S. election. Some are saying that depending on who gets elected, they might just pause rates in December and see how things go over the course of a few months after that, because they don't know what policies are going to be implemented with the next presidency. So that could have an impact in December on the rate cuts. But I think for this week, I think they're going to cut the rates by 25 basis points like everyone's kind of predicting they will, and then we'll have to see what happens in December here. But overall, I think this is bullish for crypto, and my price target really for Bitcoin, we're going to jump into the chart here quick and show you what I think is going to happen towards the end of November here. So I think after the presidential election winner is announced, we might see a little bit of correction here depending on who wins. But after that, I think we're going to probably break up eventually by the end of November through this previous all-time high. And then we might hit the 76,000 price target here before we come back down and retest the previous all-time high. And then I think in December, we could maybe break up to this 82,000 mark towards the beginning of December or in the middle of December. I think that's what could potentially happen with Bitcoin. But I don't have a crystal ball. This is just personally what I'm thinking is going to happen here. But I do think that we will break all-time highs over the course of the next month here. I think investors are just waiting to see what happens with the U.S. presidential election. And once that happens, I think regardless, either way, Bitcoin is going to do what Bitcoin is going to do regardless of who wins the election. And I think we're going to eventually break through that all-time high and start moving up into a bull run here. But I do think that if Trump wins, we'll have even more bullish momentum in crypto over the course of the next year. And if Kamala wins, there's also talk about her being more pro-crypto than the current administration, so that would be good as well. It really is going to depend on who she puts into place that could affect crypto policy in our government. So we'll have to see what happens here over the next week. But make sure you get out and vote tomorrow if you're a U.S. resident. Vote for whoever you think is best for this country, but make sure you get out and vote. If you don't vote, you're not going to change the outcome of this election. We really need people to get out and vote. It is important regardless of which side you're on, whether you're voting for Kamala or you're voting for Trump. Make sure you get out and vote for what you think is best for you in the future of this country. That's pretty much what I got for this video, guys. Please subscribe if you're not subscribed and hit that like button. We'll see you on the next video.